I'm Dan, this is At Midlife Crisis Motorcyclist, and today I'm going to talk to you about whether it's sensible or not to ride a retro bike like this Royal Enfield Interceptor 650 through the depths of winter. Now, you'll have seen this bike already in a video on the channel. That was from when it arrived, and I was all kind of fired up by new bike enthusiasm and perhaps dazzled by the chrome and shiny bits on the bike. Since then, we've had some adventures together, and I've maybe changed my opinion on a few of the things in that first video, but we'll get to that in due course. Now, in the time I've had it, I've actually covered about, well, over 700 miles, which I don't think is bad going through kind of January and February and early March and all that. All the kind of winter grime, the salt, all that sort of stuff. Does that make me a kind of hardcore motorcyclist, or maybe just a bit of an idiot fired up by kind of new licence enthusiasm and not able to kind of judge when it's a good time to go out on a bike and maybe when I should just park it up and leave it alone? Anyway, for all its kind of lack of bells and whistles like heated grips and sat-nav and all that kind of stuff, I think the Enfield has done me pretty proud, and we've had some adventures together. Part of that riding has included one of my longest trips to date, which was from here in my home in Yorkshire down to the Cotswolds for a car launch. That felt like a proper adventure. I just had to kind of tape some directions to the tank and kind of, you know, just find my way, and it took ages, I will say, but it was good fun. I saw some places I've never seen before, and apart from a little bit of motorway around Birmingham, I pretty much managed to stay on the back roads all the way. The way back was perhaps slightly less fun. It absolutely hooned it down when I got to the Peak District, and then the day after I got home, the Rika waterproofs that I'd got in on test finally arrived. So not great timing there, but I'm sure that won't be the last time I ride a bike in the rain, will it? Now, is it sensible to ride a bike like this through the winter? Well, I have to admit, some of those kind of shiny bits I was raving about in the first video are slightly less shiny than they were, and with hindsight, maybe if I were to ride an Interceptor all the way through the winter again, or as an all-year bike, I'd maybe get one of the ones with the kind of the cuss wheels and the blacked out engine, the black exhaust and all that kind of stuff. That is probably just a bit more kind of winter or commuter friendly, and I think this one is going to need a little bit of TLC. You can see here the engine cover is a bit tarnished and needs to get some polish going on that. It needs a good old clean, and I think there are signs that maybe the finish on a bike of this price is starting to show. There's a little bit of rust coming through where the frame number's been stamped as the headstock, things like that. So yeah, it needs a proper spring clean. I think I may also need to adjust the chain tension as well, and you know, just give it a proper once over. But other than that, it hasn't missed a beat. It's been as fun to ride as it was to start with. As I say, I've learned quite a lot about this bike, but maybe I'll share that with you out on the road. So let's go for a ride. Okay, so thankfully that rain was just a passing shower. The roads have dried out, and we can go for a ride and have a chat about what I've learned in the month and a bit and 700 odd miles that I've now been riding this Interceptor 650, and what's kind of changed in that time, what opinions I might have altered based on my experiences. Now, I will admit that in that first video I think I was probably a little overcome with kind of new bike excitement. You know, literally just been delivered, jumped on it, went for a ride, recorded my thoughts. So that was a kind of stream of consciousness, and kind of, you know, also kind of fired up by the novelty of being on my first retro bike and kind of getting a feel for the whole thing. So I think there are certain things I stand by from that first impression, that being the kind of general combination of friendliness and charisma that make this such an appealing motorbike. Friendliness in terms of, although by the numbers the seat height and weight look quite intimidating, in reality once you start riding, the Interceptor feels a pretty friendly bike. It doesn't feel too big. Seat height is not as intimidating as it sounds. I can get my feet flat on the floor pretty easily, and you know, I do a bit of traffic, a bit of commuting on it, and it's absolutely fine. It feels quite narrow, you can thread it through stuff, so the weight's not a handicap. So it's nice and accessible, and that's obviously, it's accessible for its price as well. Very, very affordable motorbike, so it's, that sense of accessibility is really important, and the feel-good factor as well, because you know, the other good thing about this is that because it's right at the top of the 47 horsepower 35 kilowatt A2 license bracket, you know, this is about one of the sort of biggest and most powerful bikes you can ride in that class, but also affordable. So if I were an urban hipster, and I'm most definitely not an urban hipster, but if I were, this would be a nice way to get around town, I think, because it's, yeah, small enough to be nimble through traffic, but big enough to have some status and some gravitas, and it just looks cool. Definitely looks cool. So all those things, definitely I stand by that. But on the downside, so in that first video I was kind of confidently saying how much I appreciated the fact that the Enfield comes on Pirelli tyres, and this is kind of a, you know, it's a good sign for a budget bike to come on big name tyres like that. Yeah, the only trouble is I'm not sure they're actually very much good, or at least they haven't been in the kind of slithery, wintry conditions I've mainly been riding in. Now it's dried out like this, maybe it'll be a different story, but I've got to say there were a few rides early on when it was that kind of intermediate, is it wet, is it dry, and they just felt super sketchy. I don't know if it's the compound or the fact that it's almost like the section is kind of like there's a hard edge to them, and then you fall off either side, so once you turn into a corner it feels like the bike just kind of flops into the turn and then ends up on the sidewall, and then you're just not sure of how much grip there is. And I had a couple of kind of slow corners and slow roundabouts where I felt the need to have to kind of flat track and get my foot out just to hold the bike up, and I've got to tell you, for a beginner rider that is not a happy situation. I was pretty freaked out by that, I have to say. But then I went and did my Honda off-road training, and I was promised by the Honda guys that that would help with my on-road bike handling as well, and I think it did. I think just being a little bit more comfortable with that sensation of the bike moving around, losing grip, the tyres sliding, which, as I said in that video, happens all the time when you're riding off-road. Just having that sensation sort of hardwired into my head again, that was... So definitely after I did the off-road training and then I went back out on the Enfield, I felt a lot more comfortable in those kind of slidey situations. So, and I think, as I say, now hopefully the roads are getting drier, it'll be less of an issue. But another thing I've kind of noticed, having done some miles now, is another area where perhaps the budget nature of the bike starts to show is in the suspension as well, which, you know, the kind of the forks and the rear suspension units, they're anonymous, no brand or no name items. They're obviously built to a budget, they're not particularly flash, and they're kind of a bit harsh. The forks feel a bit harsh, I don't think there's that much travel on them, and the rear suspension is also pretty bouncy, which means that you're just not sure of the kind of contact pressure of the tyre on the road, which in those kind of slithery conditions I'm talking about just kind of compounds that sense of uncertainty in how much grip you have. and that's really not a nice sensation, is it? So I think with a bit of hindsight and a few miles, you could say that the limitations of budget tyres and suspension have become a bit more evident to me. But that's kind of, it's what you'd expect. The bike is what it is. It's a retro bike, the cheap bits on it, so you know, you can't expect wonders. And it's kind of appropriate to the engine's power output. So, you know, if you want a fast bike, there are plenty of fast bikes out there. This is not one of them, but the engine's character really shines through, and it's kind of torquey, makes a really nice sound, and that's kind of got a few miles on it. The overrun is getting a bit kind of more chuntry, and it's a really, really lovely sound, and the rawness of it being an air-cooled engine as well, that's definitely something a bit different from anything I've ridden before, so I enjoy that. I wish it was just a little bit noisier. You know, once I get above about 60 miles an hour with my earplugs in, I can't hear as much as I would like to. Around town it sounds good, but I think a little bit more noise would be nice. So if anybody's got any tips for how to address that, feel free to drop me a line in the comments. I'd love to know more about how to make an Interceptor sound a bit more exciting. Yeah, I don't want it to be unsociable, but just, you know, have a bit more attitude. What was the other thing I was talking about in that first video? Oh yeah, the lack of a gear indicator. So that's not really so much of a problem. You know, you get a pretty good sense through the rev counter in the seat of your pants where you are in the power band, and you know, I don't think I've ever really missed not having a gear indicator. It's perfectly fine if the engine kind of lets you know where it is. If you need a bit more acceleration, like we might do here, you can easily just knock it down a couple of gears. So that's been fine. I've not been left wanting there. So overall, kind of comes full circle, doesn't it? So if there's one other thing as well, I'd say the gearing's a little bit short. With the lack of a gear indicator, I have occasionally, when I was on that longer run, I did think I was going from 5th to 6th, but it turned out I was already in 6th, so I'd kind of run out of gears, so perhaps the gearing is a little bit short. But again, that's fine for the amount of power that you got to play with. It's not really an issue. So that's all good, and that kind of brings me back. Kind of brings me full circle, really, doesn't it? You know, started out loving the bike, had a bit of a wobbly phase, literally, in terms of my relationship with it. Felt a little bit uncertain and a little bit freaked out sometimes by some of its behaviour. But in the round, as they say, I think I come back to that original position, which is to say that it's just a bike with loads of character. It's a feel-good bike. It's not a go-fast bike. There are other options for that, but you know, just in terms of that noise when you blip it, the way it makes you feel, the way it looks, all these kind of things, these kind of intangibles that kind of make worries about cheap suspension and dodgy tyres less of a worry. So there we go. We've been on a journey, this bike and I hope it's not over yet. and I'm very much looking forward to riding it in conditions a bit more like this. So there we go, a bit of an explanation of the things I've learned in my time so far with this Royal Enfield Interceptor 650. Hopefully plenty more fun miles to come on it yet. Now we start out with the question, should you ride a bike like this as a winter daily? I don't think there's any reason why not. I mean, obviously, you know, it's not looking quite as spangly as it did at the start of this whole loan. And I think pride dictates that I need to really address that to get it looking nice for the hopefully spring-like weather that's not too far away. As I said at the start, there are other options in the Interceptor range that are perhaps a bit more appropriate to kind of everyday hardcore winter use than this particular colour scheme, but in terms of a bike to ride, it's been absolutely fine. Now obviously I've been on a bit of a journey in terms of my feelings for the bike, starting out loving it, then feeling a little bit nervous, intimidated by the lack of grip that I mentioned in the tyres, the crude suspension, things like that. And I think while they're kind of valid criticisms of the Enfield, they have to be taken in the context of what it is. It's a budget bike, it's built to a price, it's very, very good value. So, you know, you've got to have a certain level of expectation. You can't jump on this bike and expect it to ride like a Triumph that costs another £2,000 or £3,000. And I think the main thing is, it's just an absolutely beautiful bike. The really interesting thing is that the people in my life, shall we say, who are less than thrilled about my biking epiphany, even they look at this and go, you know what, that's a really nice looking motorbike. It's a proper motorbike, isn't it? So hopefully, you know, the people who, and perhaps not so into motorbikes, can appreciate what this is all about. And I think it just has that kind of timeless charm about it that will win over even the most sceptical non-biker. And that's a really nice thing. I think I started out by saying this is a bike with charisma, and it's definitely that, isn't it? It's a bike that's just kind of, it's friendly, it's unthreatening, and it's fun, and it just puts a smile on your face. And I'm looking forward to it doing that in the hopefully nicer weather that's not too far away. So there it is. I hope you've enjoyed this update on my time with the Royal Enfield Interceptor 650. As always, I'd love to hear from you, so drop me a line in the comments if you've got any questions. I know quite a few people got involved in the comments thread for the last video and enjoyed that, so I look forward to seeing you there. If you haven't subscribed already, please do so. Hit like and the bell for notifications about pending videos, plenty of them to come as well. And for now, I'll say thanks for watching, goodbye, and ride safe.